This is part 3 of our analysis of the New Yorker article by Paige Williams titled Kyle Rittenhouse, American Vigilante. How is she doing so far? Well, go back, watch parts 1 and 2, and you will see that she's pulling a lot of propaganda techniques in this article. And she's hoodwinked some of the pro-Kyles into thinking that she's treating him very fairly. Nothing could be further from the truth. So in part 3, we're going to turn our attention towards gun control. Paige Williams is not going to let this opportunity to pound for gun control slip by. And she's going to take particular aim at the AR-15 rifle. Ooh, that's scary. Obviously not scary enough to prevent people from attacking people carrying one, but still scary enough. And then she'll turn her attention towards Kyle Rittenhouse and his struggles. Hello out there. I am trying to get through.
With his powerful brainwaves cradled in the warmth of reasoning, it's time for Johnnie Walker Dredd to straighten you out on a thing or two. Emanating all the way from exciting Las Vegas, Oklahoma, it's the Johnnie Walker Dredd Show.
Lately, gun reform advocates have stressed the importance of focusing on the how, not the why, of gun violence. Instead of exploring sociological or personal factors that may have contributed to a shooting, they want to concentrate on shutting down the mechanisms that let guns fall into the wrong hands.
In other words, we got to take them guns away from them pesky conservatives flying their American flags on the back of their trucks.
But when an event becomes a distorted media spectacle, as Kenosha did, it can be useful to clarify both the why and the how, even if the latter is ultimately more important. Kenosha, an old automotive city of 100,000 people, is on the western shore of Lake Michigan, between Milwaukee and Chicago. The lake is the main attraction. Boats on the horizon, storm waves thundering at the riprap. The first time I visited in January, buildings in the protest zone remained patched with plywood and tagged with optimistic graffiti. Heal the world.
In other words, man, come on. No real harm done. They're still optimistic. It's all good.
Just south is Lake County, Illinois. Rittenhouse's parents, Wendy and Mike, got married there in February 2000, and their daughter Faith was born 6 months later.
Gotta mention that she was born 6 months later. Gotta get that in there.
The other 2 Rittenhouse children were born in 2003. Kyle in January, Mackenzie in December. When the children were small, Wendy and Mike worked various jobs, including machine operator, housekeeper, and cashier. Mike, who struggled with alcohol addiction and sometimes experimented with drugs, was unemployed for a couple of years.
Okay, so this is the first we hear about Mike, and this is good. Paige Williams does a good job here of at least disclosing the fact that Kyle's family life was rather difficult. In fact, very difficult. And we had not heard that before.
When Kyle was 4, Mike was charged with domestic battery after allegedly punching Wendy in the stomach. He denies this. The charges were dismissed. Twice, Wendy and the children briefly lived in a shelter.
He doesn't mention what kind of shelter, but it is kind of important. Are we talking about a homeless shelter, a shelter for domestic violence victims? It's not clear.
Wendy and Mike eventually split up. Mike says that he has been sober for years and wants to repair his family relationships.
Yeah, I wonder if Robert Barnes's potential lawsuits against a lot of people for millions and millions of dollars might have something to do with that. Hard to say.
Wendy had become a certified nursing assistant, but she continued to struggle financially. The family was repeatedly evicted. Wendy sometimes felt too overwhelmed to help her kids navigate difficulties. In 2017, when Kyle was 14, she tried to resolve a conflict between him and 2 classmates, twins named Anthony and Jonathan.
Yeah, I don't think we really needed to mention their names. I mean, sure, people could have found their names if they had worked, but now you've just given it away to everybody. How many twins named Anthony and Jonathan are there out there in Kenosha or Antioch or wherever Kyle was living at the time? I think that she could have basically left this part out.
By seeking restraining orders. In a handwritten petition to the court, Wendy, who has dyslexia, wrote, "Anthony calls Cly dumb, stupid, say that going to hurt Kyle. Anthony follows Kyle around to take pictures of Cly and post them on social media."
This is really irresponsible. She has dyslexia, so she switched some of the letters around. There was no need for Paige Williams to quote verbatim Wendy Rittenhouse's statements here. She could have simply stated that Wendy Rittenhouse wrote a complaint and paraphrased what she said. Why is she doing this? And even worse, on the audio transcript, the narrator pronounces it verbatim. And there's only one reason to do this, and that is to elevate Wendy Rittenhouse's lack of education. They're trying to paint her as stupid. Dyslexia is a learning disability. This is almost making fun of that. Irresponsible. There's no excuse for this.
That fall, Rittenhouse, a pudgy ninth grader in dark-framed glasses.
Pudgy, isn't that body shaming?
Joined the Explorers program at the Grays Lake Police Department near Antioch. The police chief viewed the program as a way to teach self-discipline, responsibility, and other appropriate life lessons to youths who may have a challenging home, social, or school life. Rittenhouse participated in a similar cadet program through the Antioch Fire Department.
Now, I would have asked Kyle, because Paige Williams actually did meet up with Kyle. I would have asked him what compelled you to volunteer for these programs. He's had a very difficult home life. Why would he do this? That might have given her a glimpse into the true character of Kyle Rittenhouse, and she may have asked him. But evidently, she didn't like what he said, or she didn't ask him at all. I cannot understand why Paige Williams, who considers herself a reporter, journalist, or whatever you want to call her, would miss this opportunity to really kind of poke into Kyle's persona.
John Cokefair, the fire chief, told me, "Most of the kids that are doing this, they don't play football. They're not cheerleaders. This is their focus."
Okay, so you spoke to this man personally. Why didn't you ask him about Kyle? What was Kyle like? Was he a good kid? Did he seem earnest? I mean, why would you not do that? Well, the answer is she might have. But if he came back and said, "Kyle, yeah, that was a great kid, man. He really, really feels like a community volunteer type, man. I tell you, he was really interested in helping people. He was always there about building up the community." She would not have printed that. And you know it, and I know it.
Jeff Myra, the deputy chief who ran Grays Lake's Police Explorers program, told me that participants trained with harmless replicas of service weapons. Explorers wore uniforms and often helped manage parade traffic. Rittenhouse went on police ride-alongs, a practice that may impart a false sense of competence or authority.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing that you probably didn't catch. Throughout all of this description here, she talks about what the Police Explorers program does, builds character and all that kind of stuff, but she never makes the connection to Kyle Rittenhouse. For example, the Police Explorers program builds discipline, but she never makes any kind of inference that that could possibly have something to do with Kyle Rittenhouse's persona, his character. But when something is uttered that could be potentially negative, she makes the connection.
One brochure declared, like police officers, explorers must be ready and willing to encounter any emergency situation, such as first responders to accidents or injuries.
Okay, so here would have been the opportunity to say, perhaps the reason why Kyle went to the Kenosha protests was because of this sense of duty, but she doesn't make that claim.
In 2018, shortly after another eviction, Wendy filed for bankruptcy. She developed a gastrointestinal bleed that required hospitalization, and Faith was also hospitalized after an attempted overdose involving over-the-counter painkillers. To make money for the family, Kyle worked as a fry cook and a janitor while attending school online.
By the way, she doesn't mention that it was probably Kyle that called 911 for his sister. Also, there's no mention about how any of this poverty and health affected Kyle. He's 17 years old. He's obviously gone through a lot of trauma, but she makes no mention of it. Now, it's good that she's mentioning the fact that at least these things happened to him. And so the reader or viewer can at least make the inference. But there's no discussion about how intense poverty and severe health problems and an attempted suicide by one sibling could impact a 17-year-old kid.
He also became certified as a lifeguard and found part-time work at a YMCA.
He's already done more work by the time he's 17 than the people he shot combined.
Eventually, he hoped to graduate from high school and become a police officer or a paramedic. In January 2020, Rittenhouse, now 17, tried to join the Marines, unsuccessfully.
Yeah, there's been a lot of speculation about that. A lot of people have said the Marines wouldn't take him. I don't think he could, because I think you have to have a diploma before you can join the Marines. Hard to say. I'm not sure.
Shortly after the pandemic arrived in America, the Y furloughed him. He applied for another lifeguard position, and while awaiting word, he hung out with his sister Mackenzie's new boyfriend.
He applied for another position. Man, he looks like a kid that likes to go to work, likes to help, likes to be productive. The same cannot be said for the people he shot.
Dominic Black, who was 18. Rittenhouse had always wanted a brother, and he became close to Black. They camped and fished and attended car meets. Black's family lived in Kenosha, but he often stayed in Antioch with the Rittenhouses. Upstate, where the Blacks owned property and liked to hunt, the boys practiced shooting at bullseye targets and bottles.
There are going to be a lot of people out there, especially in the Northeast, that are going to go, oh my gosh, they were shooting rifles. And those rifles had real bullets in them. While in most of the country, people are like, yeah, target shooting. We used to do that when I was a kid. Good old all-American activities for young boys and girls. There's a huge divide in this country between urban and rural. And my gut feeling is that a lot of the people that are going hysterical over the fact that Kyle had a rifle are probably from more of the urban settings. They don't understand country life.
Wendy had let her kids play with Nerf and paintball guns, but she didn't allow actual guns in her home. Rittenhouse wasn't old enough to buy a firearm, but he wanted one anyway.
Like just about every kid. Okay.
Black owned a Smith & Wesson M&P 15, an AR-15 style rifle.
Oh no, the dreaded AR-15 is now going to take place front and center here.
In 1994, after a series of mass shootings, Congress banned many assault weapons. A decade later, the ban expired, and these firearms flooded the market.
Note use of the term assault weapons. No such thing.
According to the Wall Street Journal, before 1994, there were an estimated 400,000 AR-15s in the U.S. Today, there are 20 million AR-15s or similar weapons.
All right. Keep them coming. I like them.
In 2019, a Marquette University Law School poll revealed that Wisconsin residents overwhelmingly supported expanding background checks to include private sales. Yet Wisconsin's lawmakers had been resisting stricter measures and went so far as to remove a mandatory 48-hour waiting period for handgun purchases.
Let's see here. The lawmakers represent their constituents, right? Are they not elected to go in and represent the population? So who gives a damn about what the poll said?
In many cases, an 18-year-old could legally buy a semi-automatic rifle without a permit or proof of training and openly carry it almost anywhere, even at street protests.
Yeah, that's kind of common, really. But again, to somebody from the urban areas, this is outrageous. They cannot understand that. What do you mean? Like a kid of 18 can go in and buy an AR-15 rifle? Yeah, it's a rifle. I mean, if anything, the laws are much stricter than they should be, in my opinion. But yeah, there was at one point in time when I could, as a young kid, had walked into Walmart and bought a rifle over the counter. It would not have been a big deal.
In early May 2020, Black bought a Smith & Wesson for Rittenhouse at an Ace Hardware in northwestern Wisconsin, using money that Rittenhouse had given him. Black's stepfather insisted that the rifle be kept in a locked safe at his house in Kenosha. Black, who faces felony charges related to having provided a weapon used in homicides, declined to comment, and his stepfather couldn't be reached.
Smart. Unfortunately, Dominic Black opened his mouth a little bit too much before he talked to his lawyer. You know what? He's 18 years old. He didn't know better. But when the police have you as a suspect, you don't say a damn thing to them. And he made that mistake.
Rittenhouse had told his mother that he intended to buy a gun, but she assumed he meant a hunting rifle or a shotgun like her father and brothers had owned. According to Wendy, when Rittenhouse told her what he'd bought, she responded, "That's an assault rifle." But she didn't make him get rid of it.
It's not an assault rifle, but okay.
Rittenhouse had just started a new lifeguarding job when Blake was shot. On the second night of the protests, he finished his shift at around 8 p.m. and hung out with Black at Black's stepfather's place, 2 miles west of the courthouse. On social media, people were spreading false rumors that rioters planned to attack residential neighborhoods. The teens watched live streams of events that were unfolding so close to home that, when they stepped outside, they could smell smoke and hear screams.
Hear screams? To a kid like Kyle, who is like a big community volunteer type, who also fancies himself as a medic, that would have been very appealing. That would have drawn him to the protests. If he hears actual screaming, I could understand a 17-year-old thinking to himself, I've got to do something. I've got to help these people. Would I have done it? No, but I didn't have the community volunteer attitude that Kyle has. I would have looked upon the protests as pure entertainment.
The next day, Rittenhouse and Black cleaned graffiti in the protest zone, then offered to help guard what remained of CarSource. The business was insured, but one of its owners, Anmal Kindry, said to reporters that it was devastating when the police did nothing to stop rioters.
His business was insured, but the insurance company refused to pay out. Anmal Kindry got financially wiped out by these rioters. And unfortunately, he is one of the unsung victims of the Kenosha riots. He's probably been harmed more than just about anybody other than maybe Dominic or Kyle, depending on how their trials come out. When the dust clears, it might be Anmal Kindry that's the only person who has been devastated by the Kenosha shootings, other than Gage and Anthony and Joseph.
Black kept his rifle disassembled in the trunk of his car. On the second day of the protests, the stepfather had removed Rittenhouse's rifle from the safe to keep it handy, he later told police. The gun was fetched from the stepfather's house. Black later told a detective that this made him uncomfortable, but added that if he'd objected, Rittenhouse would have threw a fit.
Well, that's possible. I mean, look, he's 17 years old, and Dominic's his best friend, and he's 18. And yeah, I mean, Kyle would have wanted to have that rifle with him. The rifle was a mark of adulthood. He doesn't want to be the only person there with no rifle. That would have told everybody that he was the kid. And so he wants the rifle with him. And so, yeah, I can understand why Kyle would have been, upset if Dominic had told him no. And I perfectly understand why Dominic didn't tell him no. It's hard to tell your best friend something that's going to disappoint them severely. And we all do this. There have been many instances in all of our lives where we simply didn't have the nerve to tell somebody something we really should have because we didn't want to hurt their feelings or disappoint them. It's really common. How many car keys did not get snatched because somebody's drunk friend didn't have the nerve to do it? And so, yeah, I get it. Dominique, he should have probably not allowed Kyle to walk out with the rifle, but I absolutely perfectly understand why he didn't do so. Normal human behavior. We just don't like to disappoint our friends.
The night of the shootings, the rifle was equipped with a 30-round magazine and hung from a chest sling that Rittenhouse had bought that afternoon. At dusk, Black was on the roof of the mechanic shop while Rittenhouse and others stayed on the ground. It was Black whom Rittenhouse called following the first burst of gunfire. After the second round of shooting, Black came down and found Rittenhouse sitting in a chair inside the shop, all shooken up. Rittenhouse had placed his rifle on the flatbed of a truck.
So the idea that this was all planned by Rittenhouse kind of falls by the wayside here. Clearly, Kyle did not anticipate any of this happening. And when it did, he feels horrible. Does he feel guilty? Well, I don't think so, but he certainly feels under a tremendous amount of strain that he did not anticipate. The notion that Kyle went to the protest to shoot somebody is ridiculous. And it will not stand in court. The jury is not going to believe that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the jury will exonerate him, but they're not going to convict him because they felt that he went there that night to cause trouble. Didn't happen, and anybody who claims that he did is just ignorant.
Black later told a detective that he drove Rittenhouse home to Antioch, where Wendy gave her son two choices: turn yourself in or leave town.
I don't know what she meant by leave town. It could be that she said, I'm really disappointed in what happened here. You're either going to turn yourself in or you're going to get the hell out of my house. I don't want you around. Or it could be like, look, we have to find a place for you to stay so that the police can't find you. But keep in mind, and some people have made real hay about this, but there is an enormous amount of strain going on right now. And yeah, I think that people were going to come up with kind of irrational responses to it in the heat of the moment. I think if it happened to me, I would have been thinking about leaving town and trying to hide from the cops too. The thought would have entered my mind. I would have seriously considered it. At least at that time. But after you think about it and you realize that you have to turn yourself in, and he did. So yeah, right after a really stressful, traumatic experience, people will come up with these solutions in their mind. They're scared. And leaving town and trying to hide from everybody is perfectly rational. I mean, the actual act of it is not, but the thinking of it is perfectly normal. Luckily, he came to his senses and realized that turning himself in was really the right thing to do. After the trial ends, some of us might be wondering, hell, maybe it would have been better for him to run. Boy, I shouldn't be laughing. Not funny.
Around 1 a.m., she drove him to the police station in Antioch. They waited together for more than 2 hours.
By the way, people are saying, the next day. It was 1 a.m. Let's face it, it's the same day.
Kyle crying and vomiting. Finally, 2 Kenosha police detectives, Benjamin Antaramian and Martin Howard, took them into an interview room. When Antaramian explained that he needed to read a police form aloud, Rittenhouse asked, "Is it Miranda?" and then said, "I know how Miranda works." He did not know how Miranda works. He both wanted a lawyer and to talk. incompatible desires.
I have no idea why this matters. Why even bring this thing up? Okay, yeah, he's 17 years old and he thought he understood Miranda, but he really truly didn't. Hell, that's every 17-year-old kid.
The detectives halted the interview. Rosenbaum, the man who had chased Rittenhouse into the parking lot, was dead. The man who had struck him with the skateboard, Anthony Huber, a 26-year-old demonstrator from Kenosha County, was either dead or dying. The third man shot, the one with the handgun, was also a 26-year-old demonstrator, Gage Grosskreutz, who lived near Milwaukee. Videos were already starting to make their way online. Rosenbaum taking his final breaths, Huber clutching his chest and collapsing, Grosskreutz shrieking, his right biceps mangled.
Right, so we're going to show the aftermath of it, but what we're not going to do is we're not going to show what led up to it. Although they did. I mean, we do see some of the action that took place before, but the news media didn't exactly go through a lot of trouble to explain how Kyle got into the situation he did.
Messages from strangers were appearing on Wendy's phone. Your son is a white supremacist murderer bitch. You and your family need to count your fucking days. We're going to make your home look like Beirut.
Binger says, I don't have any real evidence here that Kyle's life is in any danger here, so we want to go ahead and disclose his address. Yeah, okay. Binger, by the way, biggest scumbag of everybody involved in here, except for possibly Joseph Rosenbaum.
They knew where she lived. Wendy told Kyle, "We can't go back." When Rittenhouse learned that he was being arrested, he exclaimed that someone had hit him with a fucking bat. Widely circulating videos show no such attack.
Yeah, victims' testimony isn't always really reliable in these situations. I don't know what compelled Kyle to make the claim. I don't know what he saw, what he thought he saw. Whatever the case, we have the incident on video. It doesn't really matter.
Antamarian explained that the charges could range anywhere from reckless injury to reckless homicide to second-degree homicide. Wendy wailed, "Murder?" Rittenhouse, who had been speaking with the detectives in a familiar manner, requested a favor. "Can you guys delete my social media accounts?"
Can you guys get the porn off my social media so that nobody finds out what I've been looking at? Actually, it could be simply a matter of, I've been really talking crap about my uncle and I just don't want anybody to know about that. Obviously, the police are not going to delete his social media contacts, but I don't think that Kyle understood that anything that's not directly related to the case is not going to be publicized, or it shouldn't be. You don't know Binger. I mean, we might just get leaks from someone showing that, well, Kyle really had terrible feelings towards his sisters. Oh my God, what a terrible kid. Look what he's saying about his sister in this one Facebook message. I think that Kyle might be fearing something like that, but in reality, that's not supposed to happen. But we are talking about Binger.